Welcome to the Education Corner, a podcast by Education Choices magazine.
Education Corner podcast would like to welcome Marvyn Harrison, founder of Dope Black Dads and Belovd agency, Monia Zahid, head of equity, diversity and inclusion at Haberdashers Boys School, and David Mulae, assistant head pastoral and DEI leader at Cranleigh School. Marvyn Harrison is the founder of Dope Black Dads, which started as a WhatsApp group between a handful of fathers in 2018 and has since grown across social media and the web, spanning live events, an award-winning podcast, children's books, and much more. Marvyn also founded Belovd agency in 2020, working with companies across many sectors to improve their EDI policy and create more inclusive workplaces globally. Haberdashers Boys School is an all-boys school for pupils aged 4 to 18. The school aims to attract and retain talent who want to make a meaningful difference to the world, and says that HAB students are ambitious, globally curious, tolerant and resilient, with a desire to improve themselves and the world. Monia Zahid joined Haberdashers in 2017 and became Head of Diversity and Inclusion in 2022. Monia works to promote EDIB across staff and students in the school, as well as the education sector, and has been awarded the University of Chicago Outstanding Educators Award for her work. Cranleigh is Surrey's leading coeducational independent school, offering boarding and day education for pupils aged 13 to 18. Cranleigh aims to provide young people with the strength to succeed, the wisdom to make informed choices, resilience in the face of failure or difficulty, and the insight to recognise their privilege and to shape the future culture of the world through lives of service and leadership. David Mulae became involved in DEI education following the murder of George Floyd in 2020, which led him to become involved with the Afro-Caribbean Society at his previous school and undertake training to become a DEI officer and support pupils. David joined Cranleigh in 2022 and describes his role as supporting staff and pupil well-being, promoting pupil leadership and leading DEI initiatives. We're thrilled to have you all on our Education Corner podcast. To begin with, could you each tell us a little bit about where you work and your role, perhaps beginning with Marvyn?
Hi, yes, I am the founder of Dope Black Dads, but also the founder of Belovd, and a lot of our work is centered on frontline community support for Black fathers actually around the world. Our main hubs are the UK, US, and South Africa. And with Belovd, a lot of my work is supporting companies with the transformation of internal culture, inclusive marketing, and now accessible technology education.
And David?
I work at Cranleigh School in Surrey. We're set in 280 acres of beautiful Surrey countryside, excellent facilities, but still close to London. My role as assistant head pastoral and EDI lead is to facilitate in creating a culture of belonging within the school. I work to enable every child to feel seen, to feel heard, and feel valued. And through recognition and support of individuals within our community, that we create a culture where all become stronger. This is mainly achieved strategically through people partnerships and projects, through the Cranleigh Being People groups, our sixth form peer mentors training programme, through celebration and knowledge recognition events, and a diverse visiting speaker programme, amongst other initiatives. A lot of the work I do is to promote empathy and help people show kindness to one another.
And Monia.
Good morning, Chloe. I'm responsible for EDI here at Haberdashers Boys School. Our school starts at age 4 all the way to 18. Next door, we have Haberdashers Girls School, who we work very closely with. And I often talk about the idea that in my role, I wear the hat, but that EDI is a whole school responsibility and a whole school commitment. And I think having initially looked at our EDI efforts through a curriculum lens, if you like, in recent years, we have moved much more towards the idea that actually EDI is safeguarding. And so there is a real pastoral focus to our efforts as well.
That's lovely to hear. The educationalist Robert Smith deferred to Anthony Besnet in the 18th century and stated Besnet became a teacher in 1739, a time when strict physical punishments were common in schools. He rejected this approach and treated his students with respect. He also changed his teaching methods as needed to fit the various learning needs of his students. Besnet believed that children of all genders, races, and abilities deserve to have equitable access to the educational opportunities. Obviously, that's how schools have moved forwards over the last 200 years, 300 years. How do you feel that this is still being demonstrated in schools today? And why is there now a concern in some cases that some of this progress could be reversed?
I think the premise to that question is that the work in belonging has been going on for a long time. It's not necessarily a new thing. In your example, since the 18th century, while we've modernised our thoughts on how best to provide the support, the idea of promoting, supporting belonging remains equally important. I would like to see DEI work to continue to be focused on in schools, and as Monia said, safeguarding is so embedded in the culture of everything that we do. When you then consider that EDI work is safeguarding for pupils and staff with protected characteristics, I think it highlights the importance of the continuation of the work, regardless of what it's called.
And Monia.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right to acknowledge the progress made so far. You know, if we think about the inclusive education that schools try to provide, individual learning plans, the concepts and ideas around, or the values around respect for all, that is exactly, you know, one, historic, but two, exactly what EDI kind of encompasses. And there is evidence of continued progress. You walk into any classroom, you will see differentiated teaching methods. You'll see policies that are, for the most part, anti-discrimination. There's an emphasis on well-being and mental health. That is all progress that has been made over a very long time. But you're right as well that there is pushback against diversity and inclusion, pushback not necessarily from schools themselves or communities themselves, but a much larger force, if you like. Some of the reasons for that, or some of the examples of why that's happening, is we're seeing suggested restrictions on topics that are taught or things being taken out of curriculums that took a long time to get in. We're seeing stricter policies around discipline, for example, that can impact the most disadvantaged students, for example. And if we just take one group and we look at our SEND pupils, the reduced support that we are seeing happen towards what they need, and that individualized support that needs funding and needs specialisms, that's also being cut, and schools are struggling to meet those student needs. So there is definitely a move away, but just like David hinted at, that's not from the schools themselves, that's from other forces outside the schools. I think schools are very much still committed to EDI.
I just think, in my view, when we're talking about transformation, we talk about whether it's personal or of organizations and institutions, we have to be very aware that change happens significantly slower than maybe we would like and we're present to. If we look at the ratio and the population diversity statistics, we are still a majority. I think it's like 86% still very much a white country. The transformation to understand the impact and the important things that were learned during the last 7 to 10 years around DEI have been incredibly important and put us in a new space that we never would have imagined. The new language that exists in the world, the new understanding that exists in the world. And for the people who are open to it, we 100% have made significant amounts of progress to the person in the middle, the person who's much more inclusively minded, and also minoritized people in terms of their sense of belonging.
Cultural humility is defined as a lifelong process of self-reflection and self-critique, whereby the individual not only learns about another's culture, but one starts with an examination of his or her own beliefs and cultural identities. And this is cited in the Cambridge Journal. How do you feel we should continue to develop and raise awareness of this, and despite the many global events taking place, support this as a concept?
Teachers and educators, we're in a position of social responsibility and huge privilege to be able to work with young people. What we want to do is promote their social awareness, and do that by creating cultural literacy within the young people. This is mainly through continued conversation through the curriculum and through broader school recognition events. For example, recognising Rosh Hashanah, it's the first day of Ramadan. Today, recognising the people in our community who are celebrating Ramadan, but communicating to the entire school the importance of it to Muslim pupils. We celebrated the Lunar New Year recently. And by recognising those in our community who do celebrate these events, we help pupils who are learning about it for the first time, and it supports PSHE. It actually supports and promotes fundamental British values, and it supports the wider curriculum in schools. And by these pupils going out into the world with this cultural knowledge, we are helping them in the positions of leadership they are going to fulfil in the future.
I think the introduction into other cultures for me was the first time that I realized that this type of work is the kind of thing that I want to be doing long term, and actually meeting other cultures and having a lot of things demystified was a huge invitation for me to go and stay curious as a young person and into my adulthood. And I think, again, when I, referencing my books, when I created my books, I Love Me and The Best Me, I was very much focused on introducing cultural nuance into those books in a way that allowed non-Black people to see our world from our perspective while creating a universal message that everybody can adapt to. So that's even things like the types of clothes that I would wear, the type of food that would be at our breakfast table, and all of those things really made the usness into the center, which I think was really, really beautiful. And I think for me, I think that ongoing importance just makes the world very normalized. But it's not just about, respecting and honoring people when you meet them in this country. It's also when you travel abroad, like the export of Britishness when we go abroad is kind of to speak louder about the things that we want in our own language, and it not to be a reflection of the actual place that we go to. And that has been going on for too long. And I think really getting to experience all the different cultures and hear the language, see the food, the religious practices has really brought me a lot of wisdom. And I think it's something that's really incredible, and it should happen in the school environment.
Very much so, and I think it very much is a huge focus now in many schools. The recent African Caribbean Education Network, I understand from our discussion before this meeting that there have been two, in fact, one at St Paul's Girls' School for heads, and then a further meeting at North London Collegiate. And obviously many leading independent school leaders and students were in attendance. And at both, Monia, you were able to speak representing the work that you're doing at Haberdashers Boys. For the conference, it states that ACN anti-racism conferences are the only school-focused anti-racism events that are designed and delivered by students, teaching staff and academics. Could you tell us a little bit more about this and the importance of this conference? It's obviously significant that this is happening. And some of the key issues related to DEI and anti-racism that were discussed.
So my experience with this was the first ACEN conference. I think it was back in 2022. And professionally, I've worked in independent schools with large numbers of Black and brown pupils, but most are predominantly white environments, and certainly as far as the staff body goes. The ACEN conference was the first time I sat in a room of teaching professionals who not only were talking about equity, diversity, inclusion topics that I believe strongly in, but also in a room of people that looked like me. And that's really, really powerful as far as the annual conference goes. However, the recent Heads and Deputies Conference was about making sure that senior leadership and heads are included in that conversation, many of whom are keen to get this work done, many of whom champion this work in their schools. But the leadership of this needs to come from the top. We need the leadership, we need the guidance, we need the support of senior leaders, of governors, and that's where we then look further and beyond that to government to show leadership in this. However, on a school level, we actively partner with ASEN, we are a registered school, we actively partner with Belovd, with Black Lives in Music, with Hemisphere, all for racial inclusion work, and we partner with numerous other organisations when we consider other protected characteristics as well. And I believe partnership and working in unison with other schools and organisations is hugely important.
And Marvyn, perhaps that's the sort of thing that it would be great if you were able to have some form of a voice and take part in, I would imagine.
It's a great idea, and I feel that, you know, I was raised in the Saturday school culture, and that was the last time that I know that we had real interactions that were dedicated into specific learning from our history that were accurate and honouring the full picture of where we've come from. And literally because of funding and just the cost of everything, these things happened in communal spaces, community centres, churches, on top of any shop that you could find, and you'd have a room full of people learning additional learning. That's always been the way that we've had to teach our young people. We've never really had a national solution to the correct way to educate young Black people. So I love the idea of that being a continuing conversation, there being adjustment, and anything that is done intentionally for us, in addition to the baseline education that we receive, will help us in terms of raising the next generation. But I'm a huge advocate of additional learning that is specific and intentional, and we just need more spaces and more people doing it.
As one of the keynote speakers at this conference, how do you feel the conference will have developed and raised awareness of such key issues? And is this something that more schools should be able to share and take part in? I think it's a wonderful thing that's happening, but perhaps it's how to spread the word and get more people involved.
One of the most important things, or the most unique things about these the ASEN conferences that have happened over a period of time now is actually it uniquely provides a platform for some real honest conversations, but the intended audience are the educators. But by bringing together the students who sit on a panel, teachers and academics, the event creates a space where actually real experiences of racism are shared. And hearing that is really humbling. David, I know you'll agree with me, you know, hearing firsthand accounts from students, from colleagues, from staff, directly impacted by the issues that we're trying to talk about at the conference, makes the discussion more personal and more impactful. And attendees always talk about the idea that they walk away with greater resolve to try and address these things. Because the other thing with any EDI efforts is that not only can it be lonely, but actually it can also get tiring very, very quickly. So then the opportunity to meet in these conferences, to meet people who feel the same way as you and are trying to do the same thing as you, puts a spring in your step to go back and carry on with your efforts. And like I said, when the students are the ones who are addressing you, you really are forced to recognize the importance of the work that you're trying to do as well. I think the other thing that the conference does really well is that it encourages schools to reflect on their own practices, how far they've come, what are they doing so well, what are they not doing so well. And the networking opportunity is that's how David and I have, you know, that's how we met. And the conversations that we have begun to have has been thanks to that meeting. And I think that having an avenue for that is really, really important. The second part of your question was that should more schools take part? Absolutely. I'm not talking about, you know, should schools attend for their own good and for their own improvement, but the more schools that you have taking part in these kind of conversations, the more you have an opportunity to share and take part in some of the initiatives. You know, you're getting access to diversity perspectives. There's opportunities for cross-school collaboration, and also you're creating a movement, an educational movement. And you go away from, you know, this is a nice thing to be able to do to in your school, to hopefully a standard that is expected of all schools, and that can only be a good thing.
I think the information sharing is one of the most important angles of this. From small ideas, I shared before the idea that we can do name recording, we can get skin tone plasters, just in conversation talking, well, what are you doing in your school? And how can I then go back and apply that into my school environment? But also, how can we have the conversation with pupils? And anything that promotes, discusses or supports schools with these issues is invaluable, because ultimately these people are going out into a world where this is still live, it's still active, and they need to have a working knowledge of how to navigate it and how to lead on it. And that's one of the aspects that EDI work really benefits even non-minoritized peoples.
Forbes, it recently stated that on his first day in office in January the 20th, Trump signed an executive order titled Ending Racial and Wasteful Government, DEI Programs and Preferencing. This order directed all federal DEI staff to be placed on paid leave and eventually laid off. These are just facts. Obviously, many people around the world and in the US particularly unanimously voted for the current Republican government and continue to support them. But obviously, in your role as DEI experts, how are you able to guide children? And obviously your work also takes place with other staff members through dramatic and impactful changes that are taking place, and perhaps comfort any that may feel upset or dismayed.
I think it's something that actually a lot of schools and individuals are grappling with right now. When policies like this change so dramatically, can feel really unsettling, especially if you've been working so hard to make schools and workplaces more inclusive. But I think the key thing and the key driver for us here has been that our efforts in DEI is bigger than a government policy or a movement, if you like. When it comes to young people in particular, I think it's really important to help them understand that history moves in cycles and progress is often met with resistance, but that doesn't mean you keep pushing forward, and take these moments to kind of have discussions, have an opportunity for critical thinking, help students analyze what they are experiencing, what they're seeing, who, these shifts that are happening, who are they affecting? Because they won't be affecting all of them. How do you stay engaged in creating a positive change when it feels like everything around you is going the other way? And I think your role in all of that dialogue is just offering reassurance. Just because government change course doesn't mean that as schools, we can't continue to champion inclusivity and diversity. A lot of our work stems, like I said, from well-being, from safeguarding, from our students feeling like they belong at school. That doesn't have to be impacted by political movements or political changes. That messaging is really important for the students. Keep those conversations going, offer students an opportunity to kind of share. There might be students who don't see the problem, don't see that there's an issue, and that's absolutely fine. That's the whole point of the dialogue. The goal isn't to create more division, it's to encourage dialogue, to ask bigger questions, and make sure that at least in school, the values that we keep telling them about fairness and respect remain at the heart of what we're trying to do.
The key word there is dialogue. I think when the guidance, when the news changes again so quickly, then it can detract, the conversation shifts, and it can detract from a genuine dialogue about the work that we're doing, how best to support consider individuals within our communities. DEI work is, I believe, morally and ethically the right thing to do. But beyond that, there's research to show that DEI work benefits organisations. It makes them more adaptable. It makes them more profitable. It makes the employees happier and makes them more productive. So there are companies who've worked this out, and DEI work will continue in these companies. Again, whether it's called DEI explicitly or not, those that have done the work and embedded DEI culture into their systems will continue. Those that were doing it performatively, well, they now have a reason to stop doing it. But again, it shows both in terms of the people that use the products, but also in terms of the bottom line. DEI work is profitable for companies to do, and communicating that to pupils who are going to go out into industry and become leaders is important for the school as a whole, beyond the EDI agenda. It all comes back to anything that hinders that conversation is a negative thing, and we want to actively foster a sense of belonging within our community, and anything else is unhelpful.
I think just what David and Monia was mentioning in regards that once the seed has been planted and the education has been implemented, the amount of people who have received intentional anti-bias training, inclusion training in different forms, skyrocketed significantly. And as a result, that information is already in workplaces. It's been adapted into policies, procedures, into contracts, into payment terms. All that information as now exists. Whether you consciously remove it and change its title does not take away the impact of all the information that now exists in the public conversation. And we cannot get sad about the progress that we have made. We really have to make a honest assessment about what the last 10 years looks like and really look at actually how much progress have we made, how many people have we benefited, the changing language, the changing behavior, the changing understanding, and what we can still create from that without the permission of anybody, because now we're in charge, we have the information, and we want to do it.
Further to this, Time magazine stated throughout his campaign, Trump showcased an anti-trans rhetoric across his speeches, ads, and written platform policies. One of his advertisements stated that his Democratic opponent, Vice President Kamala Harris, is for they, them, not you. Now, obviously, many of us, as we've all been discussing, the world has turned. Few of us would want to go back to pre-1967, when in the UK homosexuality was legalised. Whether we agree with some of what's taking place globally or not, how can we continue to have conversations and discussions around recent events and statements being made and reassure young people?
I think it's deeply worrying that it's becoming increasingly difficult to have constructive dialogue around these issues. Certainly in the US and increasingly in the UK, it feels. All we can do is support our own community as best we can and make sure that our community is confident, feel they belong, and constructively critical of what they see and hear. We promote critical thinking within our pupils. We provide spaces so they can question information and that they can have the dialogue between themselves. And I think that's our responsibility as a school.
Or making space for meaningful conversations rather than reacting with outrage or, shutting people down. The reality is, I know the examples we've talked about have been in the US, but if you think about the riots in the summer and some of the rhetoric that we've seen here in the UK, now these statements, these actions, they don't exist in a vacuum. They reflect some political, societal shifts. And I think we need to prepare our students to kind of start asking some really important questions in those discussions. I'm thinking about some of the things we did last year in our school around what was happening in the Middle East and the conflict that was happening there. And for our older students, we created something called Perspectives. And it was a space where students could engage with the issues that they felt so strongly about. And my big thing was that when you have these discussions, it's an opportunity for you to hear the other side. You are not being asked to leave having changed your opinion. So it's not about convincing the other person one way or the other. It's just hear what the other person feels. And I think that's really, really important, because when we're having these conversations, there's a real space to encourage empathy. I don't agree with you, but I hear you. And that works with young people. And so, that's just one area. But if you think about policy or political discourse, these are real people, trans individual, the LGBTQ plus communities, immigrants. These are all real people. And I think it's very important to remind students of that and how they can be directly impacted by that rhetoric. And so when you're making space for these conversations and when you're talking about lived experience, if you can, you're grounding these discussions in reality, as opposed to, oh, how funny that politician said this again, or has been on X and has posted this. It's about the impacts on real individuals, and that's really helpful.
It's really important that we have to learn from historic ties where we've looked at, there was a time in history where women were called hysterical and put into and sectioned for requesting divorces. It was like, we have to learn from the labeling in which we've created around people that we don't understand, and how much harm we've created generationally by misinterpreting and actually just not listening to people who are impacted by that experience. They have spoken, they've told us what they believe, what they understand, what they experience. We have lots of different people in society. We are going to make space and accommodate as many people as humanly possible, and we're going to be listening to see how we accommodate them going forward.
The Children and Social Media survey conducted in September 2024 revealed that 84% of children between the ages of 8 and 12 had used at least one social media or messaging service since the beginning of the year. Obviously quite young ages considering the age restrictions. We know that this data is fast growing in 2025. The government recently stated children face a significant risk of harm online, and we understand that families are concerned about their children experiencing online bullying, encountering content that encourages violence or other content which may be harmful. We will continue to do what is needed to keep children safe online. However, this is a complicated issue, and we live in a digital age and must strike the right balance so that children can access the benefits of being online and using smartphones while we continue to put their safety first. We are all now increasingly aware that social media has become something which is in many ways owned and controlled by a select group of people, and Instagram, X, Facebook, to name but a few, will be very controlled in the content that they share. But how do you think it's best to manage some of these influences and controls and the misinformation young people may be exposed to? And perhaps, David, if you start that one.
Yeah, of course. I mean, this is issues that's live with heads and with SMTs up and down the country. It's a huge question that the government themselves haven't really come to terms with. So the guidance is very, very well. There isn't really clear guidance from the government on this yet. So it's up to schools to continue what we do around critical thinking. It's up to schools to continue to teach pupils to use technology responsibly. So that's through information technology lessons, that's through PSHE programme, it's through tutoring and support from staff. We have our own monitoring and filtering systems that work as effectively as possible to both block harmful content, but also identify when people are searching, using search terms that throw up safeguarding flags around disordered eating, for example, which can then lead to pastoral conversations and pastoral leaders intervening at a very early stage before hopefully we reach anything like a crisis. And this is part of Cranleigh Being's remit, the area I lead within the school, and it's being extended the whole time. Specifically around mobile phones, schools have different mobile phone policies. Ours is that fourth form don't have mobile phones in school, and that all other year groups have restricted usage of their mobile phones. And I think that will only extend in going forward. I think that unrestricted access to mobile phones is not the way forward. It's harmful to pupils because of the unrestricted content, and even just the doom scrolling, the constant access of short bursts of information is not helping them concentrate. It's not helping deep learning. So I think that the more guidance we get, the more research-led and data-backed guidance we get, the better it's going to be. But also within the dialogue, within the communication, the more pupil-led the interventions at school are, the better it is for everybody.
And Monia.
Yeah, I'd probably add that this is really about students' digital literacy. You know, there's a lot to be done around them recognizing bias that happens when they are accessing their news online, which that's where they access their news, and the way the algorithms work and so on. They will always only get that one side of whichever opinion it is, whichever news it is, and that's actually quite a dangerous thing. And allowing them to understand that and reflect on that is really, really important. I think also understanding what their digital footprint looks like when they're in their 30s and the 40s, they're trying to get employed elsewhere. You know, liking a post right now at age 14 is one thing, but posting it and then sharing it and then reflecting on it when you're 30 is a completely different thing. And now young people don't deal with the future very well. They're very much in the here and now. And so being able to work through those ideas is really, really important. But even when it comes to liking a post, I've done some work with students where I've said, okay, well, you've liked this post, seems okay enough. Have you seen the rest of the page? Is there anything on that page that actually isn't okay? And again, you need to work through those things with them because they are very much about the here and now. So that digital literacy is so, so important for them because we are dealing with external influences when it comes to social media.
I know that the government are looking at proposals to look at the age for having accounts online to 16. I think that's a great idea. And I think even more importantly, these things need to be taught in school because, education, formal education from the state and their guidelines are always a generation behind. And it takes so long to adapt and fully update the scale of the issues that are happening in society, and learning about online footprints, digital behavior is something that should be a fundamental part of, an essential part of education. And more importantly, it's always centered around quite a negative experience, things like bullying, but it's never really centered around how we create, how we build, and how we do great things. And I think when people have a great reason to be online, it actually adopts their behavior faster than kinds of sort of scaremongering. I think the last thing I would say is that the dangers and the downsides of accessibility to online content and influences is so great. It's actually one of the central issues. It's like it sets the context for what you're able to hear about any other subject. Even dissecting news and understanding appropriate and ethical news sources should be a fundamental part of what the teachings are. How do you know if something is real? We're now looking at deepfake, which is a whole nother area, AI deepfakes, which is a whole nother area of education that needs to be centralized because some of the stuff that people are seeing aren't even real. And how do you combat those things? So it's super important. And again, really, really wanting to know that you probably have to go above and beyond and create organizations and platforms and spaces and conferences and events outside of the central educational system to be able to teach people that. Or you as a parent need to do this above and beyond whatever it is you're teaching them now, because it's so urgent and so important that there's no other way around it.
Absolutely. I mean, it's so fast moving with AI and everything else. It's moving faster almost than any of us can keep up with. Just directly to you, Marvyn. Obviously, you work with Belovd. Do you want to just tell us a small amount about what Belovd specifically does and the diverse DOPE groups, and how are you navigating some of these global issues in your work on DEI in the workplace?
Well, Belovd's big focus is about how do you change cultures within a workplace. Historically, the notion, if you go back to the 90s, the 2000s, the working culture is very much you turn up, you abandon yourself at the door, you walk in, you work to the objective, and then you leave. And we don't really care what you do, just don't bring your full self into the workplace. Well, over the last 25 years, that has dramatically shifted, and there is a greater demand from workplaces to have values in terms of what it is that how they operate internally, but also whatever it is that they're building and putting into the world. And people will choose to work there. And it's actually an issue of talent acquisition, retention, and client sales and partners and all those things are becoming an issue if your values don't align to the partners that you're meant to be working with. So it's become urgent and front of mind. That process needs to be supported and handheld at times. Our job is to build those answers for any company of any size in any country. And we have been doing that for the last 7 years. When I look at the current climate, and maybe you've understood this from the tone of my responses so far, it's how do you find the optimism in the inevitable, questionable behaviors and times that are happening, because we are focused on doing the work regardless of the context. And as I said, I'm now moving into my 40th year of existence, and I've seen enough waves of up and downs, ins and outs, good and bads, to now get a clear understanding that irrespective of how I feel about what's going on in the wider world or politically, my mission continues regardless of the weather. And it's so how am I able to deliver? And for me, the number one thing is that you need to, one, know the people who are aligned to your values, and you need to continue to equip yourself not only in language, but also in skill set to deal with the things that are happening. Inclusive technology has become a really an urgent, important part of our work because we're now looking at things like AI being made, and they've completely removed minoritized voices and our likeness from the results that are being surfaced from AI prompts. And if you're not in the data set that goes to feeding it into, you won't be in there when the data set comes out, which is a huge erasure for millions, if not billions of people. And so that has become a project. Inclusive marketing became really important because we had all these inclusive workplaces, but we didn't actually have inclusive work product. But I see it more as a service than anything else. And I'm of service to a fixed date, and I will be retiring afterwards because, it is hard work, as Monia said earlier. It's incredibly difficult work, incredibly isolating work. And it's very emotional. Like, it's about your lived experience, your likeness, your experience on earth. And sometimes, you just want to be good at your job. You don't want to have to worry about not being seen or being erased from, culture.
Very impressive, Marvyn. And also then you've got your lovely books as well, which we've enjoyed promoting, and I understand that there's more coming.
Yes, I'm very, very lucky to have made 2 books so far. The Best Me, which is about how to be your best self.
By your children, wasn't it?
Yeah, we wrote it together, which is by far the best experience I've had in life, actually, to make that book with my children. Something I did authentically, which we called Mirror Talk, to look into the mirror and yell affirmations. Turning that into a book and then touring that with them, going into their school, and watching them before and after was huge. The fact that it actually works as a process to engage your children is the cherry on the cake, really, if you think about it. And currently in the process of writing my next 2 books now, which will hopefully be out at the end of 2026.
And are they for children or more for adults this time?
Always for children, but I always make sure that my books have a nugget for adults. And so when you're reading it, you're kind of taking something in and you're like, ah. So even now, parents will come up to me and say, I've used some of your affirmations for myself, which is a really beautiful, profound compliment.
I enjoyed reading them very much. Now, final question, and David, I'm going to address it to you first, and then we'll each have a turn at answering. But what changes and plans do you have in place, I suppose, in particular in your role currently at Cranleigh, to ensure children and people can express themselves and discuss their views and opinions and navigate some of the more recent events in a balanced and understanding manner looking forwards?
So it lends to an earlier question. I think it's about creating safe spaces for pupils to be able to have dialogue and express their opinions. Part of that is through enabling students, sixth form peer mentors, to lead groups, to lead conversations, to have the confidence to deal with the trickier issues that come up. But it's also about belonging within the community, and we recognise that not just within Cranleigh, but actually within the entire education sector, Black and brown teachers are underrepresented, both in middle management and senior management and at headship level. And when you try and look at how to address that, there aren't the teachers coming through the system. So one of the projects we're working on at the moment is about developing our graduate scheme so that we are encouraging and supporting applications from minoritized individuals alongside our other applicants. And that's not just to benefit Cranleigh, it's actually to benefit the whole sector. Once we encourage these applicants in, we're going to support them, we're going to offer a pathway through, and in partnership with Leah Morris, with Wyndham James, in partnership with Baymed, we have a supported path so that afterwards they are either retained or enabled to go into the independent sector. So we're looking at active solutions that benefit the whole independent sector, not just Cranleigh School.
Very inspiring. And of course, Gideon Hammond, he was at Alton College and now at St Paul's, and the wonderful work that he did also enabling students to be able to use their names and say their names, because they were having a lot of problems with children with different cultural backgrounds. Often the teachers and staff weren't
Yeah.
recognising. So that there is a lot going on, isn't there?
Yeah, well, we've enabled name recording here as part of our pastoral module, and I've directed people to him regarding the work that he's done. But ironically, it makes me feel old. I actually taught him when he was at school.
I know. He's a really inspiring character and one to watch. And Monia.
Very similar, but I think we've touched upon quite a bit today, this idea that recent events or historical events, even whether they're political, societal, or just global, they do impact our young people who come to school and how they perceive the world. And that safe space that David was talking about is essential, where they can process, but also discuss these events in a constructive and helpful way. They need an environment where they feel comfortable in expressing their opinions, but also find space for respect for different perspectives. And that's going to be really important for them as they get older. We're very keen on something here called being the active bystander. And that comes about from this idea that when our students join us when they're younger, it's all about supporting them as an individual, their identity. They feel like they belong. We create the space for them to be whoever they want to be. Now, I think back to my own school experience. I had a great school experience, but unintentionally, it was very much you left your identity at the gates and we all walked in. No one did anything, said anything. Like I said, it was a great school experience, but that was the thing that was done. Very much trying to counteract that, say, no, absolutely not. You bring your whole self to school. But as they get older, they get through year 7, 8, 9, 10, and sixth form when they'll be leaving us, that active bystander, that allyship is so, so important. And we move away the idea from protecting your identity to actually being the biggest advocate for someone else's identity and being vocal and supportive of someone else. And that's something that we feel really strongly about. And it's interesting because our last year's year 13s came to visit earlier this term. And it was wonderful having conversations with them about their university experience and some of the ideas that they had taken forward with them in the way they socialize and in discussions that they kind of have now as fully fledged adults who are not in the school bubble anymore. And I think that's very, very important to us at Habs, that we look after you, we give you a space to be who you are, but by the time you leave us, you're doing exactly the same thing for someone else.
I think it sounds very inspirational. Marvyn, do you have any words of wisdom?
I think from my view, it's just like, what type of young people are we trying to raise and develop? And I think it's so interesting. My mum said this to me. It's actually one of the first parent advices she ever gave me, which was like focusing on them as an individual. Developing them they can learn individual things later. They can learn better writing, better reading at a day, but the foundation for the next 7 years sets the kind of person that they are. Setting their nervous system to not be responsive, reactive to everything that's going on around them, genuinely giving them a sense of self, sense of identity, sense of purpose, and that's, I think because we haven't invested significantly in those particular areas, everybody just belongs to the information that they discover later on. And they're so easily swayable, so easily manipulated, so easily coerced into different things. And I really want to center that idea, is that we really have to get back to the foundations of parents raising the fundamentals in our children as a 1.0. So when they go into an educational environment, there's actually a strong foundation of how they should exist every day, that they receive the world in, and rather than be sort of constantly coerced and moved by whatever's going on around them, because they cannot control those external variables. And I think as a result, you will get much more consistent and stable young people who will know the difference and discern the difference between right and wrong significantly earlier and faster.
Thank you so much, and hopefully we'll be able to work together again soon.